Okay, so now let's move away from talking about the life of Lord Byron and talk about perhaps arguably the most important contribution, which today we call the Byronic Hero. It's important that Lord Byron, he did not title this figure the Byronic Hero. This happened, years later when different critics and literary historians started writing about the works of Lord Byron. Now, the roots of the Byronic hero are in the character of Satan. And a lot of people, when they hear this, they go, "What in the world, Mr. K? What are you talking about?" Now, we have to remember that we're really not too far removed in the context of the course from the American and French revolutions. So what happened is that readers began to sympathize and identify with Satan in the war between heaven and hell, and kind of admired Satan, even though as a flawed arch-rebel who was taking on a great antagonist. So in other words, they started to look at Satan as a rebel and admiring him for standing up to God, just like people during this time admired common citizens, in America standing up to King George, and then over in France standing up to the king and the queen. So that's when we talk about rooted in the character of Satan. Okay, it's that idea of being a rebel. It has nothing to do with worshiping Satan. So you need to get that part out of your mind. Now, the contemporary figure for the Byronic hero is Napoleon. Okay? Napoleon, during the turmoil of the French Revolution, he's seized power, created himself as emperor, started war on the continent, almost succeeded in conquering the continent of Europe, and only failed when the invaded Russia and got ground down. So with the figure of Napoleon, it combined that aspect of doing something really great and grand, as well as having, some moral shortcomings. So, for Byron himself, with the role of subjectivity that we've been talking about, Byron himself, there's some self-identification between Byron and the Byronic hero. All these different aspects here of flawed grandeur, awe-inspiring powers, having heroic aspirations, Byron takes on himself and kind of passes on to the character that he's created. So when we go through and we read the different works of Byron that feature the Byronic hero, there's a sense of fluidity, of moving between all of these different figures. Now, with the different characteristics that we see here, the important thing to remember is that the Byronic hero is the ultimate individual. And this is one of the lasting contributions that Lord Byron and his writing made to Romanticism, that the individual, him or herself, is the judge of good and evil, right and wrong. The Byronic hero is often a young man who has conflicting emotions, very moody. They're gloomy a lot. They're unsatisfied. They're dangerous to themselves and others. There's lots of conflict going on. The Byronic hero is very introspective, looking inwards, and tied in with the idea of being the ultimate individual. In this sense of autonomy, they insist on defining their own moral code. And this leads us to that next bullet point. The Byronic hero does not like social norms. Now, there's the difference here between these three terms: amoral, moral, immoral. Now, if you're a moral person, that's when you follow the moral codes for your society. right? If you're immoral, then you break the moral codes of your society. If you're amoral, you declare yourself to be outside of all of those rules. So in other words, the Byronic hero defines his own moral code. And the advantage to this is that it provides an escape for the reader. Many readers during this time as well as today, they have a sense of helplessness and powerlessness when they're faced with all of these different institutions that oppress us. Also, the Byronic hero has a troubled past, and as a result, he's an exile, he's an outcast, he's an outlaw. Just as happened with Satan, right? Satan was cast out. Napoleon, after he was defeated and captured, he was exiled. And Byron himself, he left England forever, never was to return. So again, we're seeing some interplay between the roots, the contemporary figure, and as well as Byron himself, his own life, in creating today what we call the Byronic hero. And what happens is that society views the Byronic hero as an arrogant loner. Now, a lot of people said, okay, that's cool. Well, so, are there what's the influence of the Byronic hero? During this time, the Byronic hero became an archetype for many novelists. You'll see here all these different novels: Moby Dick, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In America, as well as England and France, all throughout Europe as well as America, these different novelists created their own Byronic heroes. And, in case you're curious, the Byronic hero is still with us today. This is one of the most popular film characters that we have, right? All these different versions of the Byronic hero. And in addition, the Byronic hero is the source of what we'll see later, what we'll call the anti-hero. So this is a very brief look at the first of the later Romantic poets, Lord Byron, Byron Shelley Keats, his contributions to British literature with the Byronic hero.